My daily day's struggle. Alex woke up each morning with a familiar ache, a silent frustration that gnawed at his resolve. He understood English perfectly when he read articles or watched films. Every word clicked into place, making sense in his mind. Yet, when it came to uttering those very words himself, a heavy curtain of shyness and uncertainty would descend, trapping his thoughts firmly behind his lips. This was his daily day's struggle. He longed to engage in fluid conversations, to express his opinions without faltering, and to connect with native speakers on a deeper level. The gap between his comprehension and his ability to articulate felt vast, an unbridgeable chasm. He often found himself nodding along, feigning understanding, while his mind raced, desperately searching for the right words that simply wouldn't come out. Countless times, he'd started sentences, only to abandon them midway, feeling the awkward silence stretch. His self-consciousness grew with each aborted attempt, reinforcing the belief that he was somehow incapable of fluent speech. "I understand English but I can't speak well," became his unspoken mantra, a heavy burden he carried through every potential English interaction. He had tried various conventional methods, grammar books, vocabulary lists, and even expensive online courses. While these tools bolstered his reading and listening comprehension significantly, they did little to loosen the knots in his tongue. The theoretical knowledge was there, meticulously filed away in his brain, but accessing it for spontaneous conversation remained an insurmountable hurdle. He observed how other people talk in English, seemingly effortlessly, their words flowing like a river. He envied their confidence, their easy laughter, and their natural rhythm. It felt as though they possessed some secret key, a fundamental piece of the puzzle that he was constantly missing, no matter how diligently he studied the rules. One particularly disheartening evening, after another failed attempt to contribute to a group discussion, Alex felt a wave of despair wash over him. He was tired of the cycle of understanding and then failing to speak. There had to be a different way of learning English, a more effective approach that targeted his specific speaking impediment directly and powerfully. He spent hours researching online, devouring articles and forum posts from other frustrated learners. He stumbled upon communities discussing "Learn English Through Stories" and the transformative power of "listen and practice." These concepts resonated with him, promising a more organic, less rigid path than his previous academic pursuits. The idea was simple yet profound: immerse oneself in natural language contexts, allowing the brain to absorb patterns and rhythms intuitively. He decided to give it a try, a last-ditch effort before resigning himself to a life of quiet comprehension. He was desperate for a breakthrough, anything to alleviate his persistent linguistic struggle. He started by finding engaging English stories, not textbooks, but narratives that genuinely captivated his interest. He listened intently, not just for individual words, but for the intonation, the stress, and the emotional nuances conveyed by the speakers. This was a completely new way of engaging with the language for him. He sought out audiobooks and podcasts covering diverse topics, from history to science fiction. He played them constantly, during his commute, while cooking, and even before sleep. The goal wasn't to understand every single word, but to let the sounds wash over him, building an auditory familiarity with English speech patterns. Soon, he noticed subtle shifts. Certain phrases began to sound more natural, and he could predict how sentences would end. This passive listening was laying a crucial foundation, preparing his mind for the next, more active step in his journey. He felt a tiny spark of hope, a flicker of possibility. The next recommendation he embraced was, talk in English just 1 page per day. This method suggested transcribing a short piece of text, then practicing speaking it aloud repeatedly. It seemed manageable, a small, daily commitment that wouldn't overwhelm his already fragile confidence levels. It felt less daunting than spontaneous conversation. He chose a page from his favorite British novel, committing to mastering its pronunciation and flow. He would read it silently first, then try speaking it, recording himself to critically analyze his delivery. This was his dedicated English talking practice, isolated from the pressure of real-time interaction. At first, it felt incredibly awkward and artificial. His tongue stumbled over unfamiliar sounds, and his voice sounded strange and hesitant even to his own ears. But he persisted, reminding himself that consistency was key, and that every small step contributed to his larger goal of fluency. He wouldn't give up this time. He also decided to focus specifically on, let's talk in British English, as he found the accent charming and many of his preferred stories featured British narration. This provided a clearer target for his pronunciation efforts, rather than attempting to mimic multiple different accents simultaneously. Consistency would be his ally. He meticulously practiced the unique nuances of British vowel sounds and intonation patterns. He sought out videos of British speakers, trying to replicate their speech rhythm and articulation. This deliberate focus narrowed his scope, making his daily practice sessions more concentrated and, surprisingly, more enjoyable and rewarding. The 1-page-a-day routine became a sacred ritual. Every morning, before starting his busy day, he dedicated 20 minutes to his spoken English practice. He used a mirror, observing his mouth movements, trying to align them with the sounds he wanted to produce. It was slow, painstaking work. He discovered the power of shadowing, repeating phrases immediately after hearing them from native speakers. This technique, a core part of English talking practice, helped him to internalize natural speech rhythms and connect sounds to specific muscle movements in his mouth and throat, building muscle memory over time. There were days when frustration crept back in. He'd feel no progress, his words still felt clunky, and his tongue felt heavy. On these difficult days, he'd remind himself of his initial struggle and the small, almost imperceptible improvements he had already made. He celebrated tiny victories, like mastering a tricky th sound. He started recording short monologues about his day, using simple sentences at first, then gradually adding more complex structures. This "how to talk in English" strategy helped him transition from reading aloud to spontaneous self-expression, building confidence in his ability to form his own thoughts verbally. He also joined online language exchange communities, cautiously at first. He started by just listening, observing how other people talk in English, paying attention to their conversational fillers, their pauses, and their ways of expressing uncertainty or agreement. This provided real-world examples. Gradually, he began typing short responses in the chat, then progressed to brief audio messages. The pressure was still immense, but the lower stakes of a text-based or asynchronous audio interaction felt less intimidating than a live video call. He was slowly, incrementally, pushing his boundaries. One day, while browsing an online forum, he saw a post about a local English book club. His heart pounded with anxiety, but a new surge of determination spurred him on. This was his chance to truly test his progress, to move beyond solitary practice and engage with real people. He hesitated for days, the old familiar voice of self-doubt whispering in his ear. "I understand English but I can't speak well," it reminded him. But this time, a stronger voice, built from months of consistent practice, pushed back. He decided to take the leap, despite his fear. The first meeting was terrifying. He sat quietly for the initial 20 minutes, listening to the lively discussion around him. His mind effortlessly understood every point being made, every joke, every nuance. The comprehension was perfect, as always, creating a stark contrast to his silent presence. Then, someone asked a direct question about his opinion on the book. His throat tightened, his palms grew sweaty, and his mind went blank for a split second. The old fear, the daily day's struggle, surged to the surface, threatening to paralyze him once more, but he took a deep breath. He remembered his daily page practice, the countless times he'd repeated phrases, the British accent he had painstakingly cultivated. He recalled the stories he'd listened to, the rhythms he'd absorbed. He wasn't relying on raw spontaneity anymore. He had a foundation, a muscle memory to draw upon. Slowly, hesitantly at first, a few words emerged. I thought the character development was quite compelling," he stammered, his voice trembling slightly. But they were his words, spoken aloud in a public setting. A tiny triumph, yet monumental for him. Encouraged by the friendly nods of the other members, he continued, finding a little more flow with each phrase. He even managed to elaborate on his point, stringing together a couple of sentences without major pauses. The words weren't perfect, but they were understandable and authentic. That evening, walking home, a profound sense of accomplishment washed over him. He had spoken. He had contributed. The curtain hadn't vanished entirely, but it had certainly lifted, allowing light to filter through. This was the breakthrough he had tirelessly worked towards for months. From that point on, his confidence grew exponentially. He started participating more actively in the book club, initiating small conversations, and even offering his opinions more readily. The fear never completely disappeared, but it no longer dictated his actions or silenced his voice completely. He continued his talk in English just 1 page per day routine, but now it felt less like a chore and more like a warm-up, a way to keep his linguistic muscles toned. He varied the material, exploring different genres and accents, broadening his exposure significantly. He found new joy in listening to podcasts and watching British dramas, not just for comprehension, but for the subtle nuances of delivery he could now recognize and appreciate. His listen and practice habit had transformed from passive absorption to active, analytical engagement with the language. Observing how other people talk in English became less about envy and more about learning and inspiration. He picked up new idioms, conversational fillers, and ways of expressing emotions naturally. He started mirroring these elements, integrating them seamlessly into his own emerging speech patterns. The initial, "I understand English but I can't speak well," sentiment slowly faded, replaced by a growing belief in his own capabilities. He discovered that speaking wasn't about perfect grammar or an extensive vocabulary, but about communication, connection, and courage. It was about daring to try. He began to enjoy the process of English talking practice, seeing it not as a painful necessity but as an exciting journey of self-improvement and discovery. Each new conversation, each successfully articulated thought, became a small victory, fueling his motivation further. His journey was a testament to the power of consistent, targeted effort. He hadn't achieved overnight fluency, but he had found a sustainable way of learning English that worked for him. It combined structured practice with natural immersion, bridging the gap between theory and application. He often shared his story with other struggling learners, emphasizing the importance of daily, manageable steps. Don't aim for perfection, he'd advise, aim for progress. Just one page, one story, one moment of listening every day. His advice resonated deeply with many. His British English accent, once a deliberate imitation, now felt much more natural and authentic. He could switch between more formal and informal registers with ease, adapting his speech to different contexts and audiences. The initial awkwardness had melted away over time. The fear of making mistakes, once paralyzing, had significantly diminished. He realized that errors were part of the learning process, not signs of failure. Each correction became an opportunity to improve, a stepping stone on his path to greater fluency and confidence. He even started dreaming in English sometimes, a surreal and exhilarating experience that confirmed how deeply the language had permeated his subconscious mind. This was a clear sign of true internalization, something he never thought possible when he first began his journey. Alex's story became an inspiration, showing that overcoming the speaking barrier wasn't about innate talent, but about perseverance and finding the right methods. His struggle was real, but so was his triumph, forged through consistent daily effort and a shift in perspective. He continued to seek out new opportunities for English interaction, from volunteering at international events to engaging in spirited debates with friends. Each interaction honed his skills further, building his fluency and comfort in diverse conversational settings. The daily day's struggle had transformed into a rewarding daily challenge, a continuous process of growth and refinement. He no longer viewed speaking English as a daunting task, but as an enjoyable means to connect with the world and express his true self. His life had undeniably broadened. He could now travel with more ease, forge deeper connections with people from different cultures, and access a vast new world of information and entertainment previously limited by his speaking reluctance. The world felt much smaller and more accessible. He often thought back to those early days, feeling trapped by his inability to speak, understanding everything yet articulating nothing. The contrast between then and now was stark, a powerful reminder of how far he had come through sheer dedication. The journey was never truly over, he knew. Language learning was a lifelong pursuit, but the initial, paralyzing hurdle had been overcome. He now approached new vocabulary and grammar structures with curiosity and eagerness, rather than trepidation. He shared his way of learning English on his own blog, offering practical tips and encouragement to others experiencing similar frustrations. His personal narrative resonated deeply, proving that authentic stories could indeed be the most powerful teaching tools. His message was clear: don't let the fear of speaking silence your potential. Embrace the learn English through stories approach, commit to listen and practice consistently, and never underestimate the power of talk in English just one page per day. And most importantly, observe how other people talk in English, not to compare yourself negatively, but to learn from them and adapt their strategies to your own needs. Every voice is unique, and yours deserves to be heard, loudly and clearly. Alex's transformation from a hesitant learner to a confident speaker was a testament to his resilience. He proved that even the most ingrained speaking barriers could be dismantled with patience and the right methods, turning the seemingly impossible into a tangible reality. He realized that the greatest obstacle wasn't the language itself, but his own self-limiting beliefs. Once he started to challenge those beliefs through consistent English talking practice, the path to fluency began to clear, revealing a brighter, more communicative future. His story served as a beacon of hope for countless individuals worldwide who echoed the sentiment, "I understand English but I can't speak well." He showed them that their struggle was shared, but also that a viable, effective solution was well within their reach. The joy of being able to freely express himself, to share his thoughts and feelings without inhibition, far surpassed the initial difficulties. He had not only learned a language, he had unlocked a new version of himself, more confident and connected. So, if you're battling that familiar struggle, remember Alex's journey. Pick up a story, listen intently, practice that one page daily. Let's talk in British English or any English, but most importantly, just talk. Your voice is waiting to be heard.